We'll call the meeting to order. Roll call of members, please, Don.
Mayor Mahoney.
Here.
Mayor Dardis.
Here.
Mayor Carlson.
Here.
Mr. Peterson. Mr. Hendrickson.
Here.
Mr. Pepcorn.
Here.
Mr. Ebbinger.
Here.
Mr. Strand.
Here.
Mr. Campbell.
Here.
Mrs. Shirley.
I'm here.
Mr. Grimberg. Mr. Olson.
In person, yes.
Mr. Selgerbold.
Here.
And a quorum is present.
Roger, good to see you here, finally. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of the July 24th short meeting?
So move. Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
So motion to approve the order of the agenda.
So move.
Is there a second? Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. Consent agenda. It's going to be approval of all the items. Do I have a motion to approve?
So move. Second.
Moved and seconded. Roll call vote, please.
Mayor Mahoney.
Aye.
Mayor Dardis.
Aye.
Mayor Carlson.
Yes.
Mr. Hendrickson.
Aye.
Mr. Pepcorn.
Aye.
Mr. Ebbinger.
Aye.
Mr. Strand.
Yes.
Mr. Campbell.
Yes.
Mrs. Shirley.
Yes.
Mr. Olson.
Yes.
Mr. Selgerbold.
Aye.
That is everyone.
Regular agenda, executive report. Joel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the board. So we had another busy month, obviously, a lot of construction going on. We'll do an update a little bit later in the meeting here for you. But here's a list of some presentations that I did. We had the Broadband Association of North Dakota had legislative staff here. So we had an opportunity to do a presentation for about 40 House member staff, federal House member staffs from around the country that were here visiting. They were mostly interested in broadband, but they were very interested in the P3 contracting arrangement that we have with our project. And so there was talk about how can that be applicable for broadband projects and those sorts of things. Great presentation. A lot of questions afterward about the project. Also gave a presentation to the Rotary Club. Those are always good. We did have a presentation to the North Dakota Building and Trades. They had a conference here last week, I believe. I think Bernie also talked at that conference, and I believe one of your commissioners, Mayor Mahoney, Commissioner Kolpak, also talked at that conference. So great way to interact with the buildings and trades and the folks in the construction industry, give them an update on the project. We also had in the picture you can see Senator Smith requested a tour, and so Mayor Carlson and I met her out at the Diversion Inlet site. That was the first time I had kind of been out there since they've cleaned up the site. It really looks like a finished product at this point, and it should be. It will be turned over to the authority this fall. So it was great to show the senator the great progress that's been made on the progress. This was her first trip to the FM Diversion and seeing it with boots on the ground. She was extremely impressed at both the contracting arrangement, how we approached the project, and at the progress that's been done. And in fact, she said this is certainly a model project for the rest of the nation. So very encouraging words from her. Upcoming next week, we have the American Association of Civil Engineers. In the North Dakota chapter will be here in Fargo for their conference, and we will have a bus tour of the project for that chapter. So. With that, certainly open to any questions that the board might have.
Any questions by the commission? Thank you, Joel.
Thank you.
John Shockley, you're up next, or Chris?
Good afternoon, members of the board. Terry can't make it today, so I'm going to do a brief update on the core side of the program. Most of the updates are pretty typical for what we have. We're nearing completion of the DIS and wild rice structures, as Joel mentioned. Both of them are kind of in their final completion stage. So we'll be working with the Corps on the turnovers of those as those progress. I-29 is making nice progress. They did switch traffic to the southbound lanes, so the traffic is completely off of the bypass now, and they're traveling on the new southbound lanes while they finish up the northbound connections now. So that's making good progress. Southern Embankment, SE1, again, we're sitting on completion there. We're working on turnover documents with the Corps of Engineers now, so we're in the midst of reviewing the operations manuals. So those are making nice progress. Red River is moving along well. They're continuing to pour concrete and work on the dam walls and different structural pieces as that comes up out of the ground and past foundation. So again, about 30% complete on the Red River structure. The Drain 27 wetlands, they're right now in the mode of managing weeds, which has been an ongoing battle for them this summer, and they're expecting to come in and plant this fall, and then they'll have their 5-year maintenance period to get the vegetation established. Drayton Dam, again, is well underway. They're about 3/4 done with that. We do have a media event next week that I think Amy is letting you guys know about. Their Corps is going to have some of the resource agencies up. They're in the midst of placing boulders right now, so the project's not done, but they're just going to have an event up there kind of to observe and watch that process as they place the rock arch rapids. So a few of us will be making that trip up there. If anybody wants to tag along, just let me know and we can get you in. So. Reach SE2A is making nice progress. They'll be done this fall, and are working away on that. And then again, on the design side, we've got most of the rest of the project pretty deep in design. We're past 65% on all of the rest of the designs and are working on our reviews and completions of those, with several of them being bid in the early part of next year and the rest in fall of 24, early 25. So nice progress on the core program. Any questions on the core side? And I can talk a bit about the diversion as well.
Any questions? Thank you, Chris.
You bet.
Now do we have John Shockley?
I don't know that John has updates today.
Okay, no updates.
They want you to talk, John. So on the channel side, again, as you see on the map, we're really starting to make the colors show, which is what we anticipated this year, that we'd get a fair amount of the channel under construction, and that is definitely proving true. A few highlights as you look at the map. We're nearing completion of a couple of drain inlets, so we're working on finishing those up. They're working on the outlet, which will intended to be done later this fall. So we'll start to have some connections into the Red River. We're finishing up and starting the levee. We finished the levee construction in Reach 4. So they're working heavy on getting the levees, as much of the levees built again this fall with the nice weather, and then they'll work on the main channel excavation like they did last year over the winter. Where they can do that excavation, but they can't build levees. So they'll be starting in Reach 5, or I guess they started in Reach 5 here the middle of this month, and are hoping to have most of Reaches 6, 7, and 8 levees completed before we get to fall freeze up. So they're pushing hard to get as many of the levee segments built so we can do channel excavation pretty freely all winter. In the next 30 to 60 days, you'll see they're working to get channel Reaches 6 through 8 ready to go. A couple of drain inlets, and then many of the bridge crossings will start here starting early next month, and they'll be working on bridges throughout the winter. A couple of other milestones to mention. We'll have our first asphalt pavement going down on a couple of the bypasses here in the next few weeks. The County Road 81 bypass and the I-29 bypass will be under construction, and they're starting to drive piling as soon as they can get the site dried out at the Maple. The last few rounds of rain haven't helped them there, but they'll be ready to start driving foundation piling on the Maple River Aqueduct as well. So lots of activity, lots of moving on the construction side of things for RVA now too. So nice to see all the progress. So let's stand for any questions on the construction for the channel.
Any questions? Thank you.
Sounds good. Now I think we have our drone video for the month.
Hi, I'm Tom Fuchs, the Senior Construction Manager for the Metro Flood Diversion Authority. Work on the FM area diversion project continues at full speed across numerous work sites in the region. Let's start at the north, where the stormwater diversion channel will eventually have an outlet that connects it back to the Red River, and work our way south. ASN Constructors continues to excavate the channel and build the berms that line the sides. They have progressed farther south to work on reaches 4 and 5, which are west and southwest of Harwood, North Dakota. That's hardly their only project, though. They broke ground on the first of 11 drainage inlets where water from tributaries will enter the channel. At Drain 30, which is southeast of Argusville, North Dakota, ASN completed structural excavation and is installing concrete pipes. Once the pipes are finished, cast-in-place concrete headwalls will be formed and poured at each end of the inlet before backfill is placed. As the work occurs, flows are maintained in the existing drain that passes through the channel to its existing outlet at the Cheyenne River. Once the drain inlet is complete and the channel downstream is ready, flows will be diverted to the new inlet structure where they will move under the left embankment, through the concrete pipes, and into the channel. Continuing south brings us into the heart of Fargo-Moorhead. Much of the in-town work, which is critical to the project's operation, has been completed, and the city of Fargo is working on some of the last features for that portion of the comprehensive project. 2 new lift stations and associated storm sewer improvements are underway near 42nd Street South and Drain 27. As floodwaters crest on our rivers, storm sewer lift stations, such as these, maintain drainage and flow capacity throughout the city, keeping streets and homes dry. The 2 new lift stations will provide a combined pumping capacity of 54,000 gallons per minute and will serve nearly 1,200 acres of interior watershed throughout Fargo's Anderson Park, Point West, and Woodhaven neighborhoods. As our tour brings us to the south end of Fargo, we can see the start of what will be the Metro Flood Diversion Authority Administration Building. 180,000 cubic yards of material is being placed to raise the future building site to the same level as the nearby southern embankment and provide line of sight during operational events. As a permanent North Dakota political subdivision, the MFDA will ensure ongoing operations and maintenance of the infrastructure in partnership with the Red River Valley Alliance for decades to come. Moving even farther south brings us to the control structures. Lots of concrete has been going down at the Red River structure. Ames Construction formed and installed rebar for the structure's abutments and has completed multiple concrete pours for the Stilling Basin foundations, approach wall foundations, and abutments. When they finish, there will be 72,000 cubic yards of concrete forming the structure. That's enough to fill 20 Olympic-sized swimming pools. We will end this month's tour nearby at the Wild Rice River structure. Ames is forming the east floodwall bridge deck and continued constructing portions of the southern embankment extending from the control structure to the I-29 road raise. When it's done, the components will work together to temporarily store floodwater to the south before releasing it into the channel, where it will flow north 30 miles before draining back into the Red River. Thanks for taking this month's drone tour with me. For more project updates, follow us on social media.
Amy?
Good afternoon, Mayor and members of the board. I have a short communications update for you today. I also just provided some of the information on that Drayton Dam media event, and next month we should have some drone footage of that project taking place, so I'm looking forward to that. In the meantime, we placed 2 time-lapse cameras, one's at the Maple River Aqueduct and one, which is the view you see on the right, and then around the I-29 construction area. So these are taking just 1 photo every 3 hours. But when we basically string it all together, we'll have the project coming up and be able to see how that progressed. We won't have immediate need for this, but long-term with the project, it'll be great to see how that all came together and all the activity involved. The diversion current continues to perform well, having more than 50% opens and a very high click rate. And an issue from last year actually just received honorable mention in a national communications contest. So it's nice to have that also to show that we're on the right path. In terms of media relations, Joel and Jody spent quite a bit of time on Ag Focus on WDAY this past month, able to talk about what's taking place with some of the agricultural producers in the UMA and all of the programs that have been set up for the supplemental crop insurance. Joel also did a project update on the flag, and we've been coordinating with the forum on a couple of different stories. And then beyond that, Senator Smith's visit really garnered a strong amount of media coverage through the area. Are there any questions I might be able to answer for you today?
Any questions? Thank you. Land management update, Jody Smith.
So good afternoon. On the slides before you, you can see it's a monthly progress update. On the left, you can see in the channel, again, we are nearing completion and the acquisition of all of that. The Cass County Joint Board did approve the final compensation package along that, and we do expect to close on all those parcels by the end of the calendar year. Moving over to the right-hand side, you can see the progress within the Southern Embankment associated infrastructures and the upstream mitigation area. Anything that is shaded green, whether it's light or dark, means we've acquired the necessary property rights. Anything shaded in blue means we're still in negotiations. The light gold means we're still waiting on an appraisal to be completed, and that dark orange means we have entered into eminent domain on that particular parcel. On the next slide, then, you can see just where we're standing within the construction footprint and the UMA. There was a slight uptick in the UMA footprint. We're up to 41.5% acquired. In the next slide, you can see the overall progress across the project. Again, just a slight uptick within the upstream mitigation area of about 1%. The following slide lays out the various owner groups, whether it be in the construction footprint or the UMA footprint, and the various parcels that are included in those. And then, of course, on the final slide is a high-level overview of the key activities for the past month. We do continue to negotiate settlement agreements for existing eminent domain cases. Again, noted the Cass County Joint Board did approve one that was we'll call it in the eminent domain process. We had agreed on a construction agreement. Nothing had technically been filed with the courts, but we did need to settle with the just compensation. Last month, we closed on 8 parcels with 6 landowners, and we did sign 2 purchase agreements with 2 landowners. And we've recently approved settlement agreements for approximately 30 parcels. Again, it's just a matter of scheduling those closings and getting all the necessary paperwork in place. All the appraisals are completed in Minnesota except the parcels immediately surrounding the planned Wolverton Ring Levee. So that was a major accomplishment. We just have about a dozen left on the North Dakota side. Those are scheduled to be completed mid-October. And then again, the last bullet, we resumed our focus on those in the North Dakota UMA. Are there any questions I can answer as it relates to the lands?
Any questions? Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Financial update, Mayor Dardis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Finance Committee met yesterday. There was $9,724,134 presented for approved bills. And we're continuing to carry a balance of $153,226,000. Of that cash budget, we have spent $80,572,585 so far. As you can see by the consent agenda, all those items came before the Finance Committee yesterday and had good discussion and good financial support from all of the staff as to guiding us through that. That concludes it.
Chris, you want to walk through your parts?
Thank you, Mayor, members of the board. We did also present 3 projects that were bid this month to the Finance Committee yesterday. All were recommended for approval by the board. I can do a real quick high-level view of these, and then if we want to get into any details, I can certainly do that. But the first project is Project Work Package 47C. This is for some drilling and test wells for our protection of the casserole water sites in the UMA. Again, our recommendation through the Finance Committee was to award that to LTP Enterprises in the amount of $438,600.
Let's do the 3.
Altogether?
Yeah.
Sounds good, Mayor. Second project, the next 2 projects are are the rebid of the projects that we recommended not awarding last month. We did split them into 2 packages, which was one of the recommendations we received from the contractors that weren't able to bid. Worked out well for us in this particular package in 47D. We did get more interest. Didn't so much in 47E, but we did get good competitive bids here. Again, this one is for the wet utilities or the water work related to upcoming core projects in the Southern Embankment. Again, the Finance Committee recommended awarding this project to J.R. FERC in the amount of $315,515.30. And the final one, work package 47E, is the dry utility split out from the work package from last month. We did only receive 1 bid on this one, unfortunately, but it was very near our estimate. So we are recommending awarding that project to Wagner Construction in the amount of $1,447,837.45. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have them, but we did vet these with the Finance Committee yesterday and recommended approval of them. So.
Can I have a motion to approve all 3, please?
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any questions for Chris? Mr. Strand?
Thank you. I'm just curious, we've discussed in the past when we're doing bids and RFPs and awards that we would look at the safety records of the vendors or providers. Do we do that routinely?
I don't know if we do them routinely. We certainly would flag if there was any serious concerns on Commissioner Strand, but I don't know that there's a specific requirement that we have in the bids. Look at Paul to make sure I'm not thinking that wrong, but.
They are required to provide. There is no specific requirement within the bidding process itself, but once the bids are completed, they have to submit a safety plan, and as part of their contracting items, then we make sure that they are a viable contractor and they have the safety record then. So with the North Dakota requirements and statutes for bidding, we can't include it in the bid area, but we do include it in the actual contracts themselves. So if the concern is safety, we will vet them out as we go through our contracting process.
And if there is a safety concern, they will probably not get the award?
We will, it depends on, I guess, how severe the concern is. If there's a significant concern, then yeah, we have the right to reject that. Otherwise, we'll work with them. If it's a smaller incident or something like that, then we'll work with them to ensure that they have the proper safety equipment, safety procedures in place.
Okay. John?
It is. Going forward, Mayor and Mr. Chair, like we do at the city, I would appreciate updates on if there are any workplace accidents or incidents or deaths that we should be aware of, just as an ongoing procedure, practice.
So, Chris, just to understand, we normally would have a report as we meet monthly if there are any safety concerns, and all the construction of our infrastructure in the city of Fargo, we do include it in our report. So.
Okay. I know we can certainly do that for the channel very easily. I'll have to work with the Corps of Engineers as far as the administration side of the safety programs for the Corps program, but we can certainly include that with our construction updates if there's any significant accidents on the channel side.
Thank you.
You bet.
Thank you. Lands budget update, Jody Smith again.
You need to.
Oh, I'm sorry, you got one more? Oh, vote, roll call vote, I'm sorry. Kevin, I'm trying to catch you, I just can't.
I'm trying to delay you.
I know it.
Mayor Mahoney.
Yes.
Mayor Dardis.
Yes.
Mayor Carlson.
Yes.
Mr. Hendrickson.
Yes.
Mr. Pepcorn.
Aye.
Mr. Ebinger.
Yes.
Mr. Strand.
Yes.
Mr. Campbell.
Yes.
Mrs. Sherling.
Yes.
Mr. Olson.
Yes.
Mr. Seljevold.
Aye.
That is everyone.
Okay, you ready?
Now we're ready.
Now
Sorry,
you're
Jody
ready.
Smith.
Okay. So as promised for a couple months now, bring before you today is a lands project update. You can see on that gray line, the lands and impacted property mitigation. Those brackets don't mean that we're in the hole. That actually means we're in the positive. We have an extra almost $43 million remaining in the budget. The majority of that is sitting in the diversion channel and associated infrastructure. You can see by the $24.5 million there. All of those funds will remain there. In fact, I do expect additional funds to be deposited in that line item as we continue to close in the channel. We showed earlier on the left-hand slide, just a couple of them remaining to close. When we did those acquisitions and the settlement negotiations, for a lot of those, there was a land exchange involved. And so the landowner ended up owing us money back, the Cass County joint money back. And that was in the form of the quick take deposits that was with the court. So approximately $1 million will come back into that. So we'll start this off with, we have $25.5 million sitting up there that I'm just going to kind of roll down this screen. If you go to the Southern Embankment and associated infrastructure, you can see we have about $9.5 million to meet the property right obligations there. I don't believe that that's going to be enough. I think we're going to need between $6 and $7 million additional above that $9.5 million in order to meet those obligations. The appraisals, particularly around SE2B, so that would be kind of West Fargo and Horace area, have come in significantly higher than had been anticipated. And then as previously noted, we did complete all the appraisals on the Minnesota side. So for SE4 and 5, we were able to review those based upon the budget update that was provided in March 2022. And that was a little bit under budgeted. So we have that excess there. We're going to kind of pull it down to that Southern Embankment. Still, now you're looking at, we have about $18 million remaining that I do anticipate we're going to need in the upstream mitigation area. So if you kind of roll down to that work package 38 upstream staging mitigation area, if you look, we're budgeting pretty tight right now. When you're talking about millions of dollars, it looks like you have about $12,000 left. We certainly could use those excess funds in that area. These numbers are ran through June of 2023. And in June of 2023, we had spent about 42% of the funds and we had acquired 40% of the necessary property rights. So we're tracking pretty close in that area. Again, I do anticipate that we could use those additional funds that we have available and remaining. So as of today, I do think we're on budget. I did look at some of the 30 that we have coming up that we had previously noted that we had reached a settlement, but we had not closed on. Some of those are our more significant farmsteads. So I do anticipate by the end of September on 26 of those parcels, it'll be worth $20 million. Again, we won't see that reflected in our budget until November. So I did recommend to the Finance Committee that I can bring an update back at the end of the first quarter of 2024.
Very good.
Any questions that I can answer for anyone?
Any questions? Thank you, Jody. The RIMP loan budget change request.
Yep, so I'm going to have you just keep scrolling, Peggy. There you go. I'm not going to really get into the RIMP loan very much. I think this board is familiar with what that program is, but today we are asking that an additional $5 million be allocated to this. When the program was first initiated, it was funded with $5 million. It was well received by the landowners and well appreciated by the land agents as a tool to be able to negotiate with the landowners. Approximately a year ago, $10 million more was allocated to it. And we do think this next tranche of $5 million would be the final request. Everything kind of in the green column there, that $10.7 million, that's already been obligated and approved by the various boards. Everything in that gold color has been offered. We are working on those negotiations. In fact, the Westbys for OIN 8386 was approved this morning by the Cass County Joint Water Resource District. So we'll shift that over to the green column. So we have about $1.6 million that has been offered, just has yet to be approved. Everything in the estimated, which is the blue column, means we do believe that they are eligible for a RIMP loan. They have not necessarily been offered a RIMP loan because you can see by the 2.7 plus the 2 million, we're running pretty tight on the $15 million budget. And so we do want to be able to offer that to those Then in the pink column, we have 9 property owners. I did call it the Broadshogs. They have a significant land holding within the upstream mitigation area. First indications are that they are not interested in the RIMP, but we have not settled with them, and landowners frequently kind of change their minds during the negotiations. They would be eligible for the RIMP program. Of the other 8 potential applicants, they have not gotten pre-approved. We're unclear if they would even qualify, but we do believe most of them would not qualify for this. So we think we will end up around that $17-19 million mark when it's all said and done. It is important to note of that blue column, 4 of those landowners do not have their appraisals yet. So if you think back on the previous slide for those items that were gold, they're still waiting on their appraisals. They don't have their appraisals yet, which means we're not actively negotiating with them on a settlement, not actively having those conversations about the rent because we need those appraisals for those final numbers. So it is my recommendation that we use some of that excess funds that we just looked at in the budget of that $24 million, and we allocate it towards the RIMP loan to help us with these negotiations. I know it was an important factor to note with some of the board members at the Finance Committee and the Planning Committee that once we do enter into eminent domain, this is a voluntary program. It's not something that must be allocated by the courts, and it is certainly something that we can say are no longer a viable option once we enter into eminent domain. So,
Can I have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Kevin Cam?
Thank you. So when we ask for those additional funds, you're saying that there was excess funds not used in another area that you want to apply this to. So we're not asking for this to come out of a contingency. Is that correct?
oh heavens, no.
Okay.
Paul won't let me do that.
Commissioner Strand?
He's smiling over there.
I'm mostly just curious, and it's probably me, but I'm not sure I'm used to seeing names of individuals in these types of reports. And I'm concerned and wondering about that. When we start identifying names, it changes the tenor, maybe, and perhaps puts a focus on folks that I just don't know. I'd prefer almost that we were a little more anonymous in our references to the families and names and generational farms that we're working with.
If that's the board's wishes, we can leave the names off in the future. All the ones in the green would already be public information because they will have been approved at one of the boards. So that could be gleaned from those minutes. All the ones then that would be, I mean, essentially everything we do is public information requests, but we could leave the names off in the future if you prefer.
Roger, do you have a feeling on that? Roger Olson? Because you've been part of these negotiations.
I don't see a problem with this, presenting it this way, with the names. Again, once they get to the green, it's public knowledge. It can be pulled off our, records and minutes. So, John, I understand. Certainly could be numbers there as well as names, but eventually it will be available. So,
Commissioner Campbell?
Just to follow up to Mr. Olson, when we get stuff like this, whether it's, and I'm assuming the Cass County Joint Water Resource Board and the MCC JPA, we get both an OIN number, which represents a parcel, and then we also receive the name. So it's the names are already out there, even through the acquiring entities that are going about it. So. That's just been the standard procedure, at least from the Moorhead Clay County Joint Powers Board.
We'll take it into consideration, Commissioner Strand. I think sometimes it also alerts you that you should be thankful to these people if we walk into them or see them and thank them for what they've done for us. I don't think that we're offering fair settlements with them. They deserve thank you for working with us in some ways, but we'll talk about it with the management team. Thank you. Are we done with that? Roll call vote?
Mayor Mahoney.
Aye.
Mayor Dardis.
Yes.
Mayor Carlson. Mr. Hendrickson?
Yes.
Mr. Pepcorn?
Aye.
Mr. Ebinger?
Aye.
Mr. Strand?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mrs. Schirling?
Yes.
Mr. Olson?
Yes.
Mr. Selgervold?
Aye.
That is everyone.
Program budget variable review. This is a report we got in finance and felt it's important for the board members to be aware of this. It's important that they do the review, and our team just wants us to all be aware of this because that has been a question sometime of how is the budget, what are we doing, where are we at, and what are our rights as a board. Joel Paulson?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So speaking of contingency, this is a part of our analysis on whether we are holding enough contingency or whether that changes over time. And as this board knows, of course, this is a very dynamic project and it's a very long-term project. So really on an annual basis, we take a look at those variables that go into our financial plan, that go into our contingency calculation, and that also goes into our risk assessment. So I'll just kind of step through this and answer any questions along the way and then provide the board with the results of our analysis from this year. So it all starts with a risk register process. And what we do is we analyze as a staff and with Jacobs, our program management consultant, we analyze any and all risks that we can think of associated with the project. From that risk analysis, we determine what the probability and what the chances are, whether it's a small chance of something like that happening or a very large chance. And we really kind of manage that risk register as part of that contingency view of do we have enough contingency. We take those risks and then we do what's called a Monte Carlo simulation, which is really a probabilistic determination of whether something is going to happen or not. And from both the risk register and the Monte Carlo simulation, we then put that information into our financial plan along with a financial review. So as this board knows, and as your individual member entities have been exposed to the recent high inflation rates that have affected material prices and labor prices, there was some concern from the financial committee, do we have enough contingency? Are we doing okay? And where are we at? I'm happy to report the results from our analysis do show that the project is still very viable. However, there was some changes related to inflation-induced impacts on the program. And so as of today, or as of I think it was July of this year, we are looking at the sales tax, of course, as our long-term revenue stream for the project. And through that analysis of the sales tax revenue of what it takes to pay for all of our costs, we have ticked that up from a 2.7% break even annualized growth year over year of sales tax to a 2.9% break even annualized year over year sales tax growth. Now, with that said, for the board's knowledge, we have looked at the last 4 years of sales tax growth, both with Cass County and the City of Fargo. The City of Fargo has averaged 8.4% annual sales tax growth, and Cass County has realized a 9.2% annualized sales tax growth. So we're still running almost 3 times above the break-even sales tax growth. Now, of course, past conditions are no indication of future conditions, and so it's still something that the board needs to monitor and that we as the staff at the authority will continue to keep our finger on and maintain those annual reports to the board. So with that, certainly available for any questions that the board might have.
Any questions? Mr. Campbell.
Yeah, maybe just a comment. I think to look at the sales tax from regional approach too. On the Minnesota side in Clay County, we also have some local sales taxes that are involved there, and we're also seeing those same kind of numbers. So, if you want to look at a regional approach to how sales taxes are going, I think you'd find that Clay County is consistent with what you're seeing in Cass County.
Yeah.
Could we pass the tax over in Moorhead then? Or?
We're already over here buying your stuff in Pig.
Thanks, Kevin. Commissioner Strand.
Thank you. Initially a question, then I'll follow up perhaps. Remind me when we have a revote on the sales tax to the public.
So our long-term sales tax is in place until 2084, Commissioner Strand. So that will not require a revote. I believe there is a quarter-cent sales tax that is also dedicated to the authority that goes through 2028. That sales tax is not incorporated into our long-term financial plan. Whether that were to move forward as a revote and be dedicated to the authority, of course, that revenue would then be incorporated into our long-term financial plan. If it is not, and the long-term analysis here does not include that, if it does not include, it would be baselined with what we have today.
So when the financial package was designed, it was that the quarter cent would go till 28. City of Fargo is going to revote that, John, to extend it another 20 years. And the thought is that quarter cent then would convert over to Red River Valley Water Supply for drought protection. That is a vote that may happen next summer. So that's when we're talking about that tax, street, water, wastewater, and then Red River Valley Water Supply, which is a 1 cent tax. Commissioner Strand.
So this is the time for us to have the discussion whether or not we explore and the pros and the cons when we bring this to a vote of lifting the sales tax cap. You know, there's a cap on $2,500, so people buying luxury items don't pay the same tax that people buying anything less than that value. And this is the time to have that conversation. I don't want us to set the ballot and set the wording and set the date, and then all of a sudden, gosh, we should have. And then I'd like to see a financial model that tells us what would the difference be for revenues if we lifted that cap versus not.
So on that area, we've sat, Joel and I talked about this, and we'll meet with you Monday to go over that. Because it was a consideration, Martin, early on, whether we'd lift that sales tax and what revenue it might bring to us. And so we'll go through that analysis and bring it to you. One of the things is who it might affect more. It probably will affect our contractors and farmers more than it would the normal consumer. So I think that was one of the concerns with Mayor Dardis as well, is that you may inadvertently bring out a group of people that would not like it and think that we're getting a little aggressive on it or taking ourselves. But we'll go through that analysis on Monday with you. Any other questions or comments? Roger Olson.
On the maintenance, where's the financing for the maintenance? Is it considered in this financial statement, or is that, how is that figured in here?
It's so great question, Commissioner Olson. So the long-term operation and maintenance, as far as the developer payments are concerned on the P3 channel, are incorporated into the long-term financial plan. And then, of course, we're going to have maintenance for the southern embankment and the associated infrastructure that is also incorporated in there. The long-term plan does take into account the assessment, the maintenance assessment district that was created by Cass Joint. And so we are assuming a certain amount of revenue coming from that year over year, long-term. Once we get into full operation and maintenance, of course, we can continue to do an analysis and update that maintenance levy according to the property values at the time, and take a look at that to ensure that that is still viable in our financial plan. My guess today is that we have seen property values increasing more than expected in our baseline plan. However, without a detailed analysis, I wouldn't want to give you a for sure on where we're at there. But I guess the short answer to your question is yes, that's included all in the long-term financial plan that we're analyzing.
So the funds from the assessment district, what you're saying is the maintenance will be paid from the assessment area? From the benefiting area?
That's correct. Sorry, John is correct. So sales tax would be used first. If there's not enough sales tax, then the remainder would come from the maintenance district.
That's what I understand.
Yeah. Sorry, I might have confused you on that.
when we took it, to the assessment district, it was sales tax first, and last resort would be the assessment district.
That's correct.
And certainly when the project gets done and a lot of the building is done here since the assessment district was set up. We would reassess at that time. The joint board would go ahead and reassess this area to bring in the properties that have been developed since the initial assessment district was set up. So.
That's correct,
Yeah.
Commissioner Olson. So when we get towards the end of construction, I think that would be something that the board would want to look at. So when I talk about the break-even cost here of that 2.7 going to the 2.9% annual year-over-year sales tax growth, the break-even would be anything above that or at that number would not require the assessment district to be invoked.
Okay.
Any other questions? Mayor Dardis.
Just a comment directly to Mr. Campbell's question earlier to Ms. Smith with regard to the contingency. And indirectly, it also affects the question that Mr. Olson's just asked. We still maintain $160 million in our contingency fund, and it is a very strong position on the Finance Committee that is to be maintained throughout this, so with regard to, again, to some of the indirect questions that Mr. Olson was asking with regard to assessment district or whatever, there are funds that are being set aside in case there's any issue that we have. But the Finance Committee has a very, very strong position not to touch the contingency whatsoever.
Commissioner Strand.
Thank you, Mayor and Mr. Chair. I'm not on the Finance Committee and not familiar with this necessarily at all, so hence I ask. When we have funds in reserve or set aside available, how aggressive are we or not we? How aggressive are we at making sure we're getting the highest interest rate return on those funds current moment present? Because getting CDs over 5% now versus what, 0.25% a few years ago? I'm just curious, are we really on that and making sure we're eking out every revenue we can out of the revenues that are available and getting them invested the best we can?
That's a great question, Commissioner Strand. So we use the City of Fargo as our fiscal agent. So the City of Fargo does invest our funds that are in reserve, really according to City of Fargo policy and how you guys are managing your reserve funds as well, without being too aggressive, of course, and being conservative since these are taxpayer dollars. But we do realize those revenues when they come back into the program as well. And those are variables that are also in our financial plan that we're monitoring as we move forward in time as well. I do want to just make a comment on Mayor Dardis's comment there. The contingency is all based on this risk register. So we've identified our risks. We know what our risks are. If there are things that are being proposed to add to the project that are outside that risk register, that is not contained within our contingency at all. So we need to be very diligent, and if there's something outside the risk register that comes before us as staff would certainly notify the board, and it should be something that the board considers is outside of contingency and not necessarily being tracked through our risk register.
So Joel's, Commissioner Strand's question, could next meeting we have just our financial agent come forth and give a report? I'll give you the example in the Fargo Dome. They had $50 million in their escrow account. Latest market things happened. They dropped to $40 billion. And then we hear different stories about different people. And to his concern, CDs are paying 5.5%. Would you move some of that money there? But maybe just an idea with our fiscal agent, how they're managing it, because by assumption in savings, you've got a fair amount of money. And with Dardis reporting $130 million, is there an opportunity to make some money from that as well? So perhaps just for the board, we could just get educated on what we do in our money in the savings.
Yeah, absolutely. And we do work with Mayor Dardis on that. And we do report out the revenue from our investments at the Finance Committee, but we don't necessarily talk about the investment portfolio itself. So we could certainly have the fiscal agent come in and have a discussion about that if the board would like.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
Earlier in Mr. Paulson's comments, he talks about the risk register and trying to analyze all things that could be considered that might cause risk to the project. And I'd like to note that on the handout, there's 330 items that they're evaluating and doing the analytics on. So to Mr. Barthol and to Mr. Paulson and his staff, I think that they are all inclusive as to the possibilities of where we may have risk there. I think that that's extremely well done. And I'll note also on the second to the last paragraph, on the third to the last paragraph, it's basically on materials that we're doing the analytics on as to what the inflation factors are, because most of our contracts and most of our agreements are locked in as to what the cost is going to be. But there are some material changes that can take place.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
We don't have to vote on that, right? The informational only. Other business, MFDA and the City of Fargo borrow site agreement. John Shockley to explain.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the Diversion Authority Board. My apologies for this last-minute ad, but this is a housekeeping item that will allow the core contractor to access the City of Fargo's borrow site for extra fill. This is the result of one of the core contractors needing some extra fill. Originally, the Corps had contemplated being able to take some of that fill from the diversion channel. However, because of the P3 contract and the arrangements, the P3 contractor was fully willing to allow that to occur, but wanted the Corps to sign off on some normal insurance requirements, things that you would expect from a contractor that has control of the party, and that was difficult for the Corps given its regulations to enter into such an agreement. And so the alternative that we came up with was to allow them to access the City of Fargo's borrow site. The City of Fargo has basic insurance requirements also, and so the authority will provide those insurance coverages and those requirements to the City of Fargo, and they'll also be incorporated with the specs to the contractor. And so what this agreement does is basically says that the authority will provide that indemnification to the City of Fargo for the use of a borrow pile, and then we can certify to the Army Corps of Engineers that we have permission to utilize the pile by the City of Fargo. So long explanation, there's not really a cost involved in this. It's more of a housekeeping item to allow the Corps contractor to utilize the City of Fargo's borrow. And I don't believe the City of Fargo is charging anything for it because it's just extra borrow that they're trying to get rid of also.
Can we relook at that, John? No, okay. Can I have a
deal,
motion,
John.
please? Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Mayor Mahoney.
Aye.
Mayor Durdis.
Yes.
Mr. Hendrickson.
Yes.
Mr.
Just a
Penner.
second.
Aye.
Mr. Ebinger.
Aye.
Mr. Strand.
Yes.
Mr. Campbell.
Yes.
Mrs. Sherling.
Yes.
Mr. Olson.
Yes.
Mr. Seljevold. That is everyone.
Very good. Next meeting, September 28th, 2023. Any other business for the board? Motion to adjourn? Is there a second? Kevin, you really made me go through this real fast. Thank you very much. All those in favor say aye. We're adjourned.